Independent media played a crucial role in the Occupy movement because its message directly challenged the capitalist structure that mainstream media today is built on. In 1996, the Telecommunications Act was signed, which allowed for large corporations to buy media outlets and merge with other growing businesses. This led to the creation of giant media conglomerates, which means that the opinions presented are highly influenced by big businesses, dictating what the public reads and perceives as the truth. The Occupy movement became victim to what Margaret Sissel describes as media framing, which is using a schema of interpretation, collection of anecdotes, and stereotypes that individuals rely on to understand and respond to events. The mainstream media, when describing the Occupy movement, would often frame the story using carefully chosen words to give the audience a negative opinion about the movement. In an effort to tell the story from their own perspective, members of the movement created their own independently run media sources, including the Occupy Wall Street Journal, which was funded through a Kickstarter project. Through this and various other media outlets, they aimed to tell their side of the story to the general public, explaining the purpose of the protest and how to get involved in the movement. By employing the use of independent media, the Occupy movement was able to challenge the perception created of them by the mainstream media, who chose not to comprehensively represent the movement and the issues it was addressing. What was especially interesting about the movement was how it was able to raise awareness. The movement began with a post by Cal Lon on the Adbusters blog on July 13, 2011. He referred to Wall Street as the financial Gomorrah of America and asked that on September 17th, people take to the streets of Lower Manhattan and conduct a peaceful protest. During that time, further efforts to raise awareness culminated in the creation of a short commercial. David Savage, the director, posted the 30-second spot online, and the video quickly went viral. It eventually received a TV spot on major networks such as Fox News and ESPN.
I want to see more serious political conversations starting to happen.
I want corporations out of the government, and I want people back in.
I want peace rather than militarization.
I want the top wealthiest Americans to be taxed higher and that money to go to education.
I want economic justice.
I want to be able to speak my voice without jeopardizing my job.
I want a greater regulation of the banks and the markets.
I want my kids to have a job and health care.
I want true democracy for the 99% of us who don't have it anymore.
Savage then became the creator and manager of the Occupy Wall Street website. While the ad spot did raise awareness for the movies, it still came with its criticisms. Supporters of the movement, such as Dwayne W. Waite Jr., responded saying in order for this group to keep its message going, it must advertise. Can these criticisms, then, have any validity? To raise awareness for their cause, the Occupy movement had to reach the masses in some way, but how much merit does their cause maintain if they brand themselves? An answer to both questions can be seen in an article posted by Ad Age. Many protesters have gone out of their way to explain that the protests are not anti-business, but rather against a particular way of doing business that's fattened up a tiny chunk of the populace, the 1%. Therefore, the movement was responsible for maintaining their beliefs during their branding process. While they did create a brand for themselves, they remained differentiated from the brands that had a poor distribution of wealth throughout their companies. Social media platforms such as Twitter and Facebook play a large role in our lives and arguably have as much of an impact as larger media sources like CNN to deliver messages to the public. This rise of new social media has brought to light the tensions between the general public and these news channels. With the ability to discuss with others like you online, a new trust is formed with these relatable figures, and with it, a lack of trust arising toward professional outlets. In an article titled "Protesters Get Media Coverage But Distrust It," Lindsay Lowe points out complaints regarding the overall journalistic approach to covering the Occupy demonstrations. While stories of the protests accounted for 12% of all news reports by early October 2011, there is a general distrust of those media outlets from participants. One man, age 25, commented, "If you watch CNN or Fox News, it's all about how we have no common goal," and continued to explain his preferences for other social media outlets such as Reddit and Tumblr as more reliable sources for news about the protests. Participants are hesitant to speak to professional journalists, worrying that their words will not be accurately articulated. In his essay, Walter Benjamin discusses the withering and ultimately the loss of aura in terms of mass production. Arguably, this can be applied to the distrust of mass media outlets in the Occupy movement. Stories regarding the movements are essentially being mass-produced as the events gain even more media coverage. This mass amount of mainstream coverage leads the protesters to be even less trustworthy of what is being said, thus losing its authenticity as stories and quotes are being twisted or misrepresented. While social media appears as a less credible source, it is a way to share information, opinions, and concerns across the net, which ultimately combines to numerous amounts of support, stories, and shared experiences across the globe.